And for more on the legal issues surrounding the new transgender guidelines, I'm joined now by Rachel Stockman. She's the managing editor at lawnews.com. Rachel, so from a legal standpoint here, what kind of a case do states have here?
Well, this is very interesting. So the letter that came out today is called a Dear Colleague letter, and it basically offers guidance to schools, public universities, and any publicly funded education, saying certain things must happen in order for you to get federal funds. And if you don't abide by this, we can potentially take those federal funds away. What generally happens in these types of situations, a couple of years back, the Obama administration put out a Dear Colleague letter regarding sexual assaults. And so what would happen is if a transgender person felt like they were discriminated against, for example, they would call the Civil Rights Office and there would be an investigation. At that point, if the Civil Rights Office found some kind of violation, sanctions, or potentially jeopardizing of federal funding could happen.
But can people sue the federal government for withholding funds from their schools?
That's an interesting question. I think they absolutely can. Whether they have a winning case in court is another question. But I definitely, as you can see from some of the reactions from some of the Republican governors that we've been hearing, this is definitely an issue they're going to take up. Of course, you know, you're getting at the end of Obama's administration. So if a Donald Trump was to win the presidency, would he continue with the policies set forth in this Dear Colleague letter is the question. So will it ever get to that point? I'm not sure.
And we know that there are federal laws against sexual discrimination, right? But there's not so much against gender identity. How do you see that playing out? Will it end up following the same guidelines as sexual discrimination, or is this just ultimately new terrain?
Well, you kind of hit the key issue in all of this, and that is that transgender identity and has not really been tested in federal court yet. And so whether or not sex discrimination laws cover transgender people is kind of new, a legal frontier, and it should be very interesting to see what exactly happens with this, because a few federal courts have weighed in, but there's really no definitive answer whether these laws, the two laws that are cited by the DOJ, cover transgender people as well. And so that's going to be the big legal argument going forward.
Attorney General Loretta Lynch clearly did not mince words when she came out this week at a press conference earlier in the week about this issue. And she kind of likened it to civil rights and Jim Crow laws. Does she have an argument there?
Well, what she's, I believe, referring to is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and that covers sex discrimination. And so she's saying that this falls into the same category, and they believe, they cite all kinds of court rulings and precedent that show that indeed this does fall into federal law and is protected. These individuals are protected by federal law.
So when it comes down to it, I know this is ultimately new terrain. How do you see this playing out?
Well, that is a good question, because you have many different elements going on right now. So you have this Dear Colleague letter that came out today, and then you also have I believe now it's up to 4 lawsuits that have been filed in North Carolina regarding their law. So it kind of depends on what case ends up kind of breaking legal ground, but I definitely see either way there's going to be a lot of legal play going on in terms of in the courts and outside of the courts, besides it, of course, just being a political issue as well in the campaign.
Right. A lot of those expected over the coming months, huh?
Absolutely.
Rachel Stockman, thank you so much for explaining this to us.
Absolutely.